Hello and welcome to another episode of Papa's Shop. I'm Papa. That's what they call me. Anyway, today we are going to be working on a Stihl chainsaw. I'll show it to you down here. It's an MS201tc, and the TC just basically means it has an electronic ignition. We'll get into that. But today, specifically, what we're going to be doing is, let me get the camera straight here. We are going to be changing this stuff in here, the stuff in the handle. And so the controls inside the handle pretty much obviously do everything for the saw. But as we get into it, you'll see that there's more than just squeezing the trigger and making it accelerate. So let's dig into it. So I've got laid out here, these are, if I can get my, here, I'll go up higher here. Hang on. Alright, so the main components of the inside of that handle are, and let me get, there we are. So the main components are the wiring harness, which consists of part that goes to the coil right here. These two guys right here that go to the shut-off switch. We'll get into that more later. Linkages, fuel line linkages, choke and throttle. And then we have the actual control switch. There's another name for that, but for this exercise, we're just going to call this the control switch. This pretty much, by spring related, controls everything. And then you have these guys here, and I'm not sure what those guys are called, but anyway, those those go to the other end of your linkages over here. There you go. I gotta get a different camera. Anyway, so I have taken off the carburetor, or the carburetor cover, so you can see the carburetor. First thing you want to do, so let me get into what we're doing and why. So basically, this saw runs fine when you squeeze the gas. Let me get over here, squeeze the gas. See it working in there? See, that works there. And if we squeeze the choke, that works right there. See it activate? Okay, so all that works. But when you push this down to shut it off, it doesn't shut off. And I have been into this thing twice now, and I've tried to make some adjustments. I'll show you what you can do for adjustments and things like that. But we've tried to make some adjustments, and let me see if I can get this thing to, there. Anyway, I've tried to make some adjustments on it. Adjustments aren't working. Having said that, adjustments seldom work. I mean, normally you can't be cheap. You just got to go in and just, if you're going to do it this way, you got to replace everything. So that's what I'm going to show you today. It's kind of tricky. I mean, it looks a whole lot easier than what it really is, believe me. So let's get into it. So I've taken these 3 screws loose right here. Whoops, right here. So I'm going to set this thing down so that you can see what I'm doing. So I've taken that loose, and then you just want to gently pry on this thing to make that come out. Because if you got something in here that's not working right, you kind of want to see why it's not working right. And if you can see that, beforehand, again, it's better to replace everything But obviously, if you just have one little piece broke, just replace that one little piece. In this case, I don't think I can zoom in at all. I'll just move the chainsaw closer. So here are the linkages I was telling you about. There's the safety switch there. That comes out. There's a spring that goes on the back side of that trigger switch. Okay, so all this will come out. Put all that down here. Okay. And then this stuff is pretty self-explanatory. It just comes out. Now, the trick of all this is putting it back in. Okay, so you'll want to rewind this, because there's really nothing I can tell you that here's the best way of doing it. You know, it's very tedious to get those pieces, these linkages, to go back and stay in there while holding everything in place. It's just a pain in the neck. I mean, there's no way of getting around it. This, because I'm going to show you how to tear this apart, and so putting it back together is obviously just the opposite. This piece right here hooks on this spring right up here. Okay, so when you put this back in, that spring's going to hook on there. This handle, you see this right here? This guy right here? That has to be pushed up before when you put this in, that has to be pushed up. I'm not sure if you can see all this with my hand in the way. See, like that? Then you squeeze that trigger to get it out of the way and get that to go in the hole, which is right behind it. Like that. When you put it back together, that has to go like that, because if not, see there, nothing's going to work. That's not the right way. So again, you'll see that from my angle. Okay, so we're going to pull this apart. Now remember, the reason I told you we're taking this apart is because it doesn't shut off. Okay, so here's the thing. There is an adjustment, and I actually had to get my bore cam in here to try to adjust this. I'll see if I can get this thing rotated around. This camera's horrible to do this with. Okay, right there. You see where those little prongs are down in there? There, we're getting the right way. Those little prongs back in there. Okay, those guys right there are what shut this off. Okay? So here's that piece right here. Now, this is kind of important. These two, let me get out here. This piece, see where that little brass piece goes all the way through there? So when you shut this off, basically what you're doing is you're making the connection between these two. One side goes on one side of this, one side goes on the other. Let me see if I can kind of show you here, because this is one of the main things that prevents this from shutting off. So this, one side is just going to ride up inside there like that. Okay. The other one is going to get As you shut it off, the other one is going to push up onto here. And when those two connect, that's what makes the circuit between the ground. So this is a ground, and this goes to the computer or the coil. And so when you ground those two, when these two are connected, the saw shuts off. And that's how they connect, is by both sides arcing this. So if you have a saw that doesn't shut off, you want to look inside there. You want to look inside here and see if those are actually touching. You can adjust those a little bit by taking this out, and now you can get this back up here again. Now you can kind of see how they sit in there, and then this sits right in, and they hit on both sides of that brass. Okay, now if you're looking straight on at them, these should kind of line up between here and here, because this is straight. See, so if these are straight up and down or close to, then it should shut off. Technically it should shut off. This, so when you push down on here, it's going to push, I'm trying to do this backwards, it's going to push that over. See, so there shouldn't be a whole lot. If this guy is way over here, when you first take it off, it's definitely not contacting, because when you push down, you're already here. It's going to try and push farther that way. So it needs to be here to push down to get it to be straight there. Okay, I hope that makes sense to you. But so this, what I'm saying here is that these are good. On this switch, this is probably not the issue. Now it can be these guys. I've seen this where this brass will get worn so much on here that it doesn't lift up high enough. So when it comes across on here, this doesn't really contact that brass anymore. This side is contacting the brass on that side, but this one, it's just plastic on this side, plastic on this other side, and there's a divot in the brass, and so it doesn't really make contact with it to make that ground. But you can adjust this if you need to, just by bending this back in here, and you'll figure out, bend it one way, it gets the other, you'll see which is the right way to bend it. I mean, I can tell you from here, but I'm doing it backwards on the camera, so it'll end up being backwards to you. But that's one thing that we can check. So in replacing stuff, to figure out what to replace, this is one thing. This is cheap enough. Just toss this thing out, put another one in it. All right. So that would rule that out. Another thing we got going in here, if you look very carefully, look at this. So when you have to install the wiring harness, you don't want to have the wiring harness bent or crimped in any way, because they're not fiber optic wires, but they are very thin. And so if you have them like crimped, it's possible to crimp those wires in half inside the plastic. Generally, the saw is not going to run right because it's got this computer chip in it. So it's going to realize that something's not making connection, and it's not going to run right. This saw is running great, except for it just doesn't shut off. Okay, so having said that, there's a little gutter that this runs into, that wiring harness runs in. I'm going to try and get very close here, because the whole purpose of this idea, the whole purpose of this video, is so that number one, troubleshooting. You can troubleshoot it, but it's if it doesn't work right, then you need to replace it. Which means just about everything. So we don't think these are it. However, maybe it's the connections down here. This just unplugs right out of this from the harness. It unplugs out of here. All right. Again, these are pennies to replace. So just take that stuff out and just replace it. Okay. So you want to go in and take the harness, replace the harness, and put it, when you put in the new one, put it into these grooves. Not curled up. Don't make any extra space back in here or down in here. It should go very nicely. And I'm trying to show all the aspects of this. It should go very nicely all from the coil all the way up through here. All right, we'll pull these off. On the choke side will come off fairly easy. The throttle side is a little tough because it's wrapped in there pretty tight. Okay. So the other thing you want to do, I'll put this back down again, because so at this point we know we probably want to replace these. We want to replace these prongs, which are attached to the wiring harness. Okay, the harness of this guy is basically what makes it turn on and off electrically. And so these are pretty big culprits that those, and this kind of shows you a little bit. You can kind of see just, let me turn that the right way. Kind of see just how tiny those wires are. They're really, really small. And so any kind of a crimp or a pinch or anything can give you a bad ground. One thing also, one side of this one side of this goes to the coil. This goes to the ground screw, and I'll show you that in a second. But what can happen also is that this gets corroded in here, and you can't really see it with the naked eye, but this will get corroded, and then one side really doesn't make a good connection. And so it goes to the coil okay, and the computer reads it okay, but then when you try to shut it off, it just doesn't, because one side of this is not. See how both of those go in there? One side is just corroded or whatever, and it just doesn't. But you can, if it's your own personal saw or whatever, I'm sure you can take this all apart and try to rebuild this. But honestly, I don't remember how much this costs, but it's really not that much compared to the time and effort it takes to try to restring all this stuff. You know, it's better off just throw it in a round file. So there's your. So we've come to the conclusion that we probably want to change the harness, and we want to change this guy. So in order to get the harness out, this right here, you just pinch this. It's right next to the computer. Pinch that, comes right out. Okay, once you have that off, pull the fuel line, pull the vent valve, pull the carburetor from this side, and I'll show you why in a minute here. When this choke is hooked up in here, there's a little hose down here that holds that. So sometimes you'll have to pry that loose a little bit. There you go. So if this is held up with the linkage, for whatever reason, if your linkage is still in there and you want to keep it in there, you can unhook that clutch, or the choke, by just turning this sideways. So anyway, you pull the carburetor out. Now again, I'm just going to show you how to dismantle. I'm not going to show you how to put one in. I'll show you what a new one looks like that we've already rebuilt. So basically what I mean is that everything I'm doing here, just obviously do it in reverse to put it back. But I kind of want to show you how this one is in here the right way and the wrong way. Now, just made a mistake, and I want to show you guys what I did wrong. See how that was so tough to pull out of there? Before you take that out, don't do what I just did. Take this guy out first. This is the cover for the computer cord to plug in the diagnostic machine. That should come off first before you take this off. Reason is because this plugs into that to protect it. See? And so when you jerk this out of here, you can damage those plug-ins down in there. So it's a good idea to pull this off first. Don't do what I just did. Alright, so back to doing what you should do. Make sure, I'll get the saw closer. There's little gutters for these wires to go into. Make sure that these wires go into those gutters properly. You don't want anything sticking out, anything that's down in this area here. This has to be done, I mean, everything in here has to be done very precise for everything to fit and work properly. So make sure that when you put this back, that you put all that back down in that gutter. Now we'll pull this the rest of the way out of there like that. Pull it this way. And then we'll just hook that so I don't have to get my fingers in front of the camera. And then we'll just pull all that stuff out of there. Okay? Now, we'll get this out of the way. Now, something else you'll want to do, and I've already done this, take this screw out down here. I've already done that. When you put that screw back in, be careful not to over tighten this. It's very, very easy to over tighten that. Snap that screw off inside there. It's a pain in the neck to get that thing back out. Okay, you turn this thing around. Get your AV mount loose. Now back here, got your hoses loose. Pull this screw out right here. When you pull this up, you're going to notice this guy is still holding on. Pull this gently. And what I try to do, you want to be very careful getting a screwdriver around this because you can easily pop a hole in that tube. But just lift up from the back of it back here, and just kind of tweak that out of there. Again, be very careful. If you even put a pinhole in this, replace it. You can't operate that with a hole in it. And it seems like common sense, but I have had people ask me that. Okay, Put that loose off of there. You got this little hose, goes down for the vacuum. Now here, oops, sorry about that. Now here is the meat and potatoes of these guys. There's where that plugs in. There's the ground right there. Trying to get that out and hold the camera at the same time. There. Now, that part is free. Now you can inspect this a little bit, see if you can find something wrong. This harness right here, I don't know if you can see this on the camera. This is probably the issue right here. This was not in the groove properly, in the handle grooves, and so there's a lot of rough spots. And that is the ground wire right there. There's rough spots all over it. So if anything's worn through or if it's crimped in there, it's probably not going to work right. And that's the part that goes to the computer there, goes back to the carburetor. So again, you would have thought we would have had some kind of running issue, but we didn't. Anyhow, next you want to take the front cover loose. Take that out. I already got those screws off. And now it gets pretty easy from here. Try to set that up on this side. Okay. So you got this guy here. Should have a screw in here. However, if you use these saws a lot, like our crews do, this little piece will get broken in here, and that screw doesn't really do anything. So we just have it plugged in. It doesn't serve as a ground or anything like that. Speaking of ground, this is the ground right here where that goes to. Now, we will carefully take out this plastic or this little rubber plug up here. And you just feed this wire through this hole up to the top. Now, I think we discovered our problem. Remember when I said it's a lot easier to just replace it than to try to fix it? I don't know if you can see this on the camera. Here we go. Yeah, somebody tried repairing this. So I'm thinking what's going on is that this ground in here, you can kind of see where it's tore up right there. Yeah, this tape job is probably not holding, and so that needs to be tossed out. Try again. So this is junk. All right. So what we've done is we tore everything apart. And again, when I'm not going to go through how to put it back together because rewind this video. It's the same in reverse. Just make sure that everything is in those grooves like we talked about. Make sure the wire looks good. Make sure you don't have any crimps in it. And then when you get done with a handle that you tore apart, should look like this. Now the other thing is, make sure you thoroughly clean this. Get all the crud out of there. But before you put it back together, make sure you thoroughly clean all that. When you're all done, your new handle should look like this. Now, you're going to have, for those of you who like to nitpick, you're going to say, well, that one's got a patch too on the very end of it. They all have this little fitting on here. This little, I don't know, this coating, I guess, right here where they put all that together at the factory. However, this one's got an extra piece or two of tape on it, so that probably should not be there. But when it comes to mending these, it'll work, but not for very long. So, just do it right first time. So, this is what you should have when you're all done. Any questions? Leave a comment below, over there, wherever you leave a comment on these things. Anyhow, till next time, good luck and happy motoring.